Hey there folks, and welcome back to Nature Explained. And today, despite expectations, we've decided to take a detour from our hyena extravaganza to go deep into the heart of Africa's dense rainforest, where there's an animal so mysterious that it looks like it came from a dream, or a creature you might expect to find in a fantasy novel. Often called the forest unicorn, this elusive mammal is one of nature's most fascinating wonders, with its striking blend of zebra-like stripes and a giraffe's grace. But what exactly is this incredible animal, and how did it manage to stay hidden from the world for so long? Join us on a journey to uncover the secrets of the Okapi, an animal so rare it's often called the ghost of the forest. Okapis are native to Africa and can be found in the northeast region of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Although they used to have a range which included much of the centre of the nation and possibly Uganda, these animals spend pretty much all of their lives in the Congolese rainforests, and are fairly common around river basins such as the Ruby and Lake Tele, which could explain one of the reasons why okapis are so large. This is because they stand at a height of 5 feet. Whilst that is and definitely does sound impressive, it's less so when you learn that the okapi's closest living relative and only living relative is the giraffe. But to be fair, that's like comparing a domestic house cat to a tiger. Whilst the cat cannot go toe-to-toe with a bear, they do get free food from people, and the okapi's smaller size is actually pretty perfect for its environment. A combination of low trees and dense vegetation means that tall necks are not the best idea in the rainforest. However, thanks to their comparatively longer neck than the rest of the animals in the rainforest, they're able, like their cousins, to take advantage of leaves traditionally out of reach, and as a result, they can reach larger sizes than most animals in the rainforest. The okapi can weigh between 200 to 350 kilograms, and in terms of length is 8 feet at a maximum. Now, how do you distinguish between the male and the female? Well, while subtle, there are a few ways of telling the sexes apart. Most prominent of these are the osseo-cones atop the male's head. These horn-like structures, which are part of the skull, have had scientists theorizing about how okapis use them for years, with theories ranging from a way to impress potential mates to engaging in territorial displays. Another way you can tell the two sexes apart is by looking at their coat. All okapis will have a coat which looks like a reddish brown. In females, this will be more vibrant. Another way is that females will be slightly larger than males. Perhaps the most prominent feature of the okapi, aside from its long neck, is its long legs. Despite how thin they look, are actually very strong and allow the okapi to reach speeds of up to 30 miles an hour, as well as making them pretty good at jumping. All of this gives okapis a fairly long lifespan, and whilst their lifespan in the wild is unknown, in captivity they're known to live for 25 to 30 years, which I think is a fairly good run of things. But that's not the most unique thing about the okapi. That arguably goes to its rear end, because okapis look like they copied a zebra's homework and mixed it up with a giraffe. So, what's up with the black and white rear end? Because to the conventional person, it would seem like a massive disadvantage breaking up their camouflage. Well, actually, this is meant to replicate the light coming through the rainforest, actually increasing their camouflage. But another would be to allow their young to find and follow their mothers through the dark rainforest, because when you're walking through a fairly dense and dark area of the woods, it does help to have a massive beacon that you can follow behind. Okapis, like most herbivores, have large ears, which allow them to easily pick up on the slightest movements in its environment. They also have a highly adept sense of smell, used for both food and communication between the species. However, okapis' vision is actually pretty naff, so they'll need to rely on their hearing and their scent in order to make up for this. Another unique feature of the okapi is their extremely long tongue, much like their cousin the giraffe. An okapi's tongue is 30 centimeters long, which they will use both to grab onto food when they're eating, and they'll also use it to clean both their eyes and their face. The tongue itself is black, which is another similarity with their cousin the giraffe. But another similarity between these two distant relatives is their diet, because both are herbivores, and the okapi's diet consists of over 100 different types of plants, some of which have the potential to be poisonous to humans. Mostly, they'll choose to feed in naturally occurring clearings in which they'll use their tongues to choose which plant they want, and will also use it to rip it off the stem. Still, aside from plants, okapis will consume fungi, grasses, ferns, and also various types of fruit. And perhaps most interestingly, okapis are known to eat a reddish clay found in its environment, which is essential for them to acquire the necessary salt and minerals contained in them. They're also not above eating charcoal from trees struck by lightning. Now, why do they do this, and why do they need to eat this clay and charcoal? Well, because they're herbivores, they eat a lot of plants, and whilst plants are full of fibre, they're actually quite lacking in minerals. So, that means that the most herbivores have to get their minerals from other sources. This issue doesn't exist for carnivores, because they get all their minerals from meat. Another unique feature about the Okapi is how they drink, because, in another similarity to the giraffe, they will spread their front legs in order to lower their head down low enough to drink water, and they will use their tongue to make sure it goes down their throat. Although, they do get most of their hydration from their diet. Sorry for the interruption, but if you could do me a solid and press that like and subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you want to leave a comment on what animals you'd like me to cover, I'll make sure to add it to my ever-expanding list. Anyway, back to it, as we start looking at what sounds the Okapi makes. Okapis may seem quiet, but they are incredibly social and do make a decent amount of noise. So, if this is true, why can't you hear them? Well, there's 3 sounds that an Okapi will make which we can hear. These are typically chuffs, beats, and moans. Usually, these sounds will be at a fairly low volume, and are also associated when they make contact with another Okapi. They also communicate through infrasound, which is a type of communication which is at such a low volume that humans cannot hear it. So, here's an example of the heard and the unheard sounds of the Okapi. All Okapis have territories, with the female's territory being smaller than the male's, and the males will typically overlap with multiple females. Males are highly territorial when they come in contact with other males, whereas they're more lenient with females and will allow them to pass through their territory. Alongside this, Okapis are diurnal, which might explain why their eyesight is pretty poor and why their ears are so large. Aside from territorial conflicts, Okapis are extremely shy, with most conflicts occurring between 2 males during the breeding season. In this case, much like a giraffe, they will use their necks as weapons. But aside from this, the Okapi's life is basically eat, sleep, and repeat. Okapis, as mentioned, are solitary animals. However, there is an exception to this. That's breeding. Whilst there's no specific breeding season, most breeding occurs around the season of August through to October. Okapis are polygamous, with males mating with multiple females. Females, when in season, will leave scent markings, which will allow the males to locate them. Once together, they will engage in a courtship ritual, which has only been seen in captivity, but usually involves the male throwing his head around a lot and extending his one leg. The male will also fight off any other rival males in order to secure the female, at which point they'll stay together for usually around a week or so, engaging in intercourse. After this week is up, they will return to their solitary lives, at which point, if pregnant, gestation will last for an extremely long 14 to 16 months. But after this time elapses, the female will find a quiet place in the rainforest and will give birth to a single calf. And it's no rest for the wicked for the Okapi, because usually 30 minutes after being born, the mother will nudge her calf to stand up, usually accomplishing this goal, at which point the calf will act very much as its mother's shadow, following it around. Okapi calves are basically smaller versions of the adults, with the only main differences being a somewhat more pronounced mane on its back and also an extremely white face, both features of which will diminish as they grow older. The mother and calf will spend around a couple of months in a safe area in which the calf Okapi will feed on its mother's milk and will also become more adept with its environment. A fascinating adaptation is that for the first 2 months of their lives, calf Okapis don't defecate. Now, you might wonder why, and to be honest, we don't exactly know for certain, but one theory could be that it prevents predators from locating them. At 3 months old, the calf will start to eat solid foods, and at around 6 months old, they will be weaned. But they can stay with their mother for around 2 to 3 years, which lines up with the breeding cycle, because the female usually comes into season every 2 to 3 years, at which point both gender Okapi calves will leave their mothers and look for an area to establish themselves in. With these calves usually already being sexually mature, because Okapis reach sexual maturity at 2 years old. But Okapis are not invulnerable. Despite living in the rainforest, which means they don't have to contend with many predators, still, the leopard is the main one, who will usually focus their attacks on young Okapis. But another factor is the actions and consequences of humans, because Okapis are poached for their skins and meat. But in the first for this channel, the presence of armed groups in the Congo means that any conservation action is limited in its effect. Okapis are also disrupted by human settlements because of their solitary nature. Also, habitat loss has an effect on their potential range. You also have to contend with the fact that they don't deal with true zoo transportation well. It's hard to get a large enough viable breeding population, with only a few zoos having okapis. Interestingly, we have art that depicts the okapi going back to the 5th century. However, they would be unknown to science until the early 20th century. Specifically, in 1901, Sir Harry Johnson would acquire the skin of an okapi, proving its existence to the wider scientific community, despite never seeing one himself. Not to say that people living in the local area of the Congo didn't know what an okapi looked like. In the modern day, okapis are endangered, with their population which is decreasing. Most of them can be tied back to the result of the civil wars in the Congo, with the last estimate 10,000 wild individuals, but this was over a decade ago, so it's fair to presume that that number has gone down since. Now, you might think, what about the current population in captivity? Because that's usually where there is some hope. Well, there is. Partly thanks to a gift policy with okapis, similar to the thing China does in the current day, there is currently 186 okapis in captivity worldwide, all of whom have been documented, and provide an insurance policy in case there's ever a scenario in which the wild population is on the verge of extinction. But we gotta make sure that this never happens, so it's worth supporting organisations that help to support and deal in okapi conservation. So, I mentioned okapis are the only relative of the giraffe, belonging to the same genus called the Giraffidae. Alongside this, the okapi is thought to be a more ancient version of the giraffe, as in giraffes it took a long while for the necks to evolve, and ancient giraffes had relatively shorter necks, with the divergence between the okapi and the giraffe believed to have happened around 11 million years ago. Well, that's the okapi, the Congo's giraffe. Remember to press all the things and check out the last video I did on the aardwolf, the little hyena, and we will be returning back to our hyena extravaganza next time.